Hey there, and welcome to the Unleash Your Greatness Within podcast. In today's message, I want to talk to you about mindset, having a resilient mindset, a winning mindset, an unstoppable mindset. Today, I want to talk to you about the art of the comeback.
You already know. My passion and my mission to help you unleash your greatness within. My heart goes out to the underdogs that's on their way. If you think you can go from good to great, okay, let's motivate. GreatnessWithin.com. TJ Hoisington. GreatnessWithin.com. Oh, if you dreaming it, believe in it, work hard for it, and in the process serve others in a positive way. Think you can do it.
Yes, let's talk about the ultimate comeback. And let me tell you something. Let me start by just saying this message today is not political. I don't care what side of the field you're on. It doesn't matter. I'm just going to draw some distinctions around mindset and resiliency and alliances and so forth. And what happened was yesterday was November 5th, 2024. I woke up yesterday morning with this thought. I thought, in my office, I think I have an old book from Donald Trump. And I went out to my office and I noticed I had the book, Trump, The Art of the Comeback. And so I started thinking throughout the day yesterday while people were voting and so forth. I thought to myself, I wonder if there are patterns in this book, right? Strategic plans and patterns that he applies or writes about in this book that could be applied to this 2024 run up to the presidency. And you know what? I found it. There are some patterns that he duplicated that are core to his being, and it helped him win the presidency. And I want to show you exactly how he did it. And let me just tell you, today is November 6, 2024, and it looks like it's going to be a landslide. The American people have spoken. We still have some crosstabs and other votes that are really tight that are still coming through, but it's looking really good for Trump. Whether you like him or not, I'm just talking about the results and the reality. And so what were some of the patterns that he wrote about in this book, The Art of the Comeback, that he applied in this 2024 campaign? Let's jump right into it. One of the things that I thought about as I was thinking about doing this video, and I started thinking about some of the patterns I found in the book, I thought there's one thing I learned when I worked with Tony Robbins in 1999. I remember he would always say, success leaves clues. Success leaves clues. So my thought is, there has to be some consistent patterns of business that maybe, possibly, Trump utilized in the political arena. And lo and behold, I found them. So let me just jump through some of these core distinctions. Number one, the power of persistence, overcoming setbacks. He said in The Art of the Comeback, his book, he said many years ago, sometimes by losing the battle, you'll find a new way to win the war. And it's exactly what he did. Despite numerous lawsuits, false accusations, fabricated dossiers, 2 impeachments, being raided by his Mar-a-Lago home, being raided by the federal government, and even 2 assassinations attempts. I tell you what, he is persistent. Back in the 1990s, he recounts in his book that he saw the crisis as an opportunity to learn and to rebuild. He negotiated with his creditors, creatively restructured his debts, and stayed determined. That is one thing that Trump does, hands down, amazing. The same persistence was shown in the 2024 campaign when he showed, by being out there in the public, that he wasn't going anywhere. His determination to stay visible kept his base energized, proving that persistence in the face of adversity can lead to success, whether in business or politics. That's number one, the power of persistence. And no one can argue with that. Oh my goodness. I mean, The day before the election, he did 4 rallies in the same day, crisscrossing the country. Let me tell you something. He's got energy. He has a vision for what he wants to do. He'll outwork anybody. I tell you what, he showed that persistence was critical. Number 2, turning criticism into fuel. This is what he said in his book, The Art of the Comeback. He acknowledges critics, and in his case, in politics, right, enemies, I've added that, are everywhere, but I don't let it bother me. Instead, I use their criticism to push me harder to prove them wrong. That is a resilient mindset. To take the criticism and rather succumb and give up. He even pushed harder. That's what many of his enemies didn't realize. Every time that they would attack him, it would only fuel him to work harder, to have more passion, to give more, to wake up earlier or whatever, or burn the midnight oil or whatever. And it paid off in the end. So that's the second one, turning criticism into fuel. He sees himself as a winner at his core, his self-image, right? Against all odds, he seems to find a way to make it work. Accepting defeat is simply not part of his mindset. He used criticism and attacks from opponents, from the media, to his advantage, framing himself as a fighter against the establishment and presenting his campaign as a movement of the people against elite interests. I think that's powerful, right? He uses that criticism to show, hey, you're probably being attacked like me. Let's work together to overcome this adversity. That's what he did. Number 3 is building alliances and forming a comeback team. In his book, Trump writes, good people around you are crucial to your success. I also wrote that in If You Think You Can. Having a success team around you is vital. Well, one of the things he learned during the 1990s, when his companies were on the verge of financial ruin, he needed trusted experts to help restructure deals, negotiate with creditors, and guide his companies through their challenges. Trump has always valued loyalty, and in times of difficulty, having a team of trusted allies has been essential to his success. Now, regarding his 2024 comeback campaign, Trump applied this principle, rallying key figures of the Republican Party, so that was a given, but he even had a few prominent Democrats, one of them being Robert Kennedy Jr. that joined his team. Or what about Tulsi Gabbard, who actually changed from a Democrat to a Republican? Or Vivek Ramaswamy? Or what about the richest man in the world, Elon Musk, and what he did to get the word out? I think he spent 20 days, 15 days, each day giving out $1 million in Pennsylvania to guarantee that Trump was the winner. Whether you agree with it or not, he was encouraging people against the onslaught, what he would say, against the onslaught of 90% of the media coverage being negative about Trump. It was just his way of trying to push back on some of the unbalanced media coverage. And he was able to help Trump in that fashion. He also had renowned podcaster Joe Rogan that joined his, that endorsed him, or Michael Jordan, or Tucker Carlson. Whether you like these guys or not, the point is, this time, they call it the X-Men Avengers, right? He got some core people around him that he could trust and that could help him have a successful, not only comeback, but join his team as he goes forward for the next 4 years. So when you voted for Trump, for example, it's hard to believe this, but when you voted for Trump, many people didn't vote for Trump. They voted for the team that he put around him that were trusted and capable. And when it came to his first term, he has noted publicly that he made some mistakes, that he had advisors and people around him in the first term the 2016 term to 2020, he had some bad advisors around him, some people that couldn't be trusted. He said that he was relying on the expertise of advisors. You got to remember, Trump had never been in political office before. He was really a beginner, and he made it all the way. I mean, this is a high performance thing, right? He had never been into politics, and he made it all the way to president of the United States all in one swoop. I mean, that is amazing, right? You got to call a spade a spade. That's very difficult to do, and he did it. And especially in 2016, when there were a dozen or more competitors that were capable leaders in the Republican Party that were vying for the same position. He beat out all of them. So it was an anomaly back then, but he has said this time around, he'll be in a better position because he knows who to trust. He knows who had his back, who didn't have his back. And he's better prepared to know how government functions and runs to be able to make the biggest impact possible while he's in office. And I just, in my gut, think that he's going to make it the best possible run or presidency that will impact all Americans in a positive way, to lift all boats. So even though not all the media is saying that, I think it's good to think that relatively the election was smooth, everything was good, the American people spoke their mind decisively, even the popular vote was overwhelmingly in Trump's favor. So you got to say, listen, he really did have a successful night. So the key is having supporters around you. This is what was reported in like the Washington Post and some of the other things. Reflecting on his first term, Trump admitted disappointment with some of his initial advisors. And the Washington Post said, whom he saw as disloyal and effective. This time he vowed to get it right. So he's going to do better around that. He's better prepared to go into the presidency. Next one, number 4, maintaining control over the narrative. In The Art of the Comeback, his book, many years ago, Trump emphasized the importance of controlling the narrative, stating, quote, "The media has always been a big part of my success. You have to control the narrative or someone else will." Throughout his career, Trump has shown a natural ability to shape public perception by staying in charge of his own message. And it was a tactic that was crucial in 2016 and in 2024. In the 1990s, Trump mastered the art of using attention to bolster his image. In the 1990s, Trump mastered the art of using media attention to bolster his image even during challenging times. Back in the 90s, he portrayed himself as a bold and resilient, positioning himself as someone who can overcome any challenge. In 2024, he used similar strategies through rallies, direct messages, social media, when accessible. Let's keep that real too. He connected with his audience directly by bypassing traditional media that often criticized him. Staying in control of the narrative, Trump reinforced key campaign themes like America's comeback, framing him as the leader who could restore the country's prosperity and strength. And wherever you're at on the political spectrum, maybe you don't agree with that, but that is him controlling the narrative, which is the point of this message. All right. And he created through that a unified vision. By the way, let me just go back in terms of on number 3, creating alliances and forming a comeback team. He even did it to the level of the Republican Party. I mean, think about it. The Republican Party is different from 2020 to 2024. And who did he put on as co-chairman of the Republican Party? His daughter-in-law, Laura Trump, right? That was an example of putting trusted advisors, which he has a belief in, around him so that he could be successful. And the great thing is the Republican Party showed up and delivered with their ground game and early voting. So some great kudos to the RNC this time around. The next one is The Power of Branding, America's Comeback. Quote, he says in his book, The Art of the Comeback, if you want to win, you have to know who you're dealing with and give them something to relate to. Throughout his career, Trump understood that branding is essential in business and in shaping public opinion and perception. In his 2024 campaign, Trump branded the idea of America's comeback, which resonated with millions of Americans who felt their country had left them. This theme mirrored the personal comeback journey, all about regaining success after tough times. Trump even revived the iconic Make America Great Again slogan, but then he followed up with Make America Great Again slogan. And not only that, he went to his rallies and he built on the idea of greatness by talking about, quote, America's glory days are to come. And it struck a chord with voters that the country was on the wrong path and that he could correct the trajectory. So part of that was just the power of branding on a personal level, on a business level, just learning how to control the narrative, how to brand yourself as the expert, how to brand yourself as someone who could provide the resources, and so forth. Trump does that in spades. Number 5, strategically exploiting weaknesses in opponents. In his book, quote, he says, the key to success is knowing when to strike. During his business comeback, he learned to identify opportunities and act when the time was right, whether it be by purchasing properties at low prices or seizing on competitors or competitors' vulnerabilities. The strategic mindset carried into his 2024 campaign, where he took advantage of his opponent's weaknesses to strengthen his own standing. So how was he able to do that, to exploit the weaknesses of his opponents? Wow, there were many opportunities to do that throughout the campaign, but he would often highlight policy failures, public dissatisfaction with the current leaders. For example, he capitalized on President Biden's garbage comment when he commented about half the Americans being associated with garbage. He took advantage of that. Trump also called Kamala Harris's qualifications, political stances, and statements that came off as out of touch or condescending, such as her remark, quote, listening to everyone, even if they don't vote for me, meaning she would listen to everyone, even if they don't vote for me, which was painted as a color of desperation by the media. So just noticing certain things other politicians or leaders would say that would be out of step. You think of Mark Cuban, who made a reference to strong women not being in the Trump orbit, and then all these wonderful, strong-minded, beautiful women came out to said, no, that's not accurate. We're serving the president and we think we're pretty sharp, if you will. That was an example of taking advantage of an opponent's weakness, right? And then also controlling the narrative. And he did that in an amazing way. Number 6, reinventing his image as a champion of the forgotten voter. Trump has always been skilled at connecting with his audiences. In The Art of the Comeback, he discussed the importance of understanding who you're dealing with and meeting them where they are. He learned that people respond best when they feel understood and valued. In 2024, Trump positioned himself as the champion of the forgotten Americans, those who felt unheard or left behind by the current policies. By addressing their concerns, he positioned himself as an advocate for those people that reinforced his image that he was the leader that could create the change that they were hoping for. He met with former manufacturer workers in Youngstown, Ohio, and Flint, Michigan, listening to their stories, job losses, struggles, and opioid crisis. Trump compared their experience with his own story of losing it all and fighting his way back. His approach echoed the philosophy of the art of the comeback, where he realized the value of listening to people's needs, reinforcing his connection to blue-collar workers and families. That's why I think in large part he got the popularity vote, because he reached people's hearts. Granted, there are some people that don't like his personality, think he's a little bit too bombastic. I do think this time around he's been less that way, but some people have a belief, and then the confirmation bias just keeps him in that place rather than looking and trying to look at the good that he's done to help people and what he's done to help the nation. Some people will just never see it, but if you look for it, you'll find it. And then the last one is a relentless work and reluctance to concede defeat. In The Art of the Comeback, Trump writes, "You keep going until it's right." This relentless work ethic is one of the defining traits that helped him overcome the challenges both in business and politics. In other words, resilience. He's an example of a man, of a person who has ultra resilience despite the setbacks, despite the failures. He does not have it in his being, in his core, to give up, step aside, and so forth. He will find a way to come out on top. It makes me think of, and I'm not going to get this exactly accurate, but it reminds me of the famous European chess player. I think he was Russian, so I could be wrong. That he would always play chess with someone with one less piece than his opponent. And the reason it came out later why he would do it, because when he lost, he would be able to say, well, it's because you had more pieces than me, right? So it was a way, you could say, well, that's manipulative and so forth. But hey, when you're talking about winning, you're talking about being a competitor, listen, Trump has a way of perceiving things in such a way when others see failure, he sees it as an opportunity. You got to give the guy kudos for that. I mean, hopefully more of us can be like that, not see problems and defeats as the end and see them as an opportunity to rebuild, to adjust, to pivot, and so forth, and try something new. So in 2024, Trump's refusal to bow out, even after the 2020 loss and assassination attempts during his rally in Pennsylvania, demonstrated his strong spirit. Despite the gunshot wound to his ear, he raised his bloody fist and rallied his supporters, declaring, "Fight, fight, fight." And the people got behind that. Another thought that I've had around narrative and branding and taking advantage of some of the things in terms of what his opponents said and how to exploit their weaknesses. Think about Kamala Harris when it came to saying that early on in her childhood, she worked at Walmart. Yet there was no evidence of her ever working at Walmart. So what did Trump do? Within a matter of days, he was able to work for 15 minutes in a McDonald's, and I think on TikTok got over 300 million views, or some media, social media, something. It spread like wildfire. Sure, there were those that were going to attack it, but the message was louder than the attacks. That was, he was willing to get in the fast food restaurant and work next beside the people that were working there and called those people great Americans, right? That was authentic. And I don't know if any other politician could ever do that, but he did it without a problem. Or you think about when Biden called half the country garbage or inferred garbage. Within a day, I think it was, he pulled up at his rally in a garbage truck. And that spread like wildfire as a bigger message than the critics. So it's all about getting ahead of the message. Even when Trump would make mistakes in his speech or say something that would be a little bit off, oftentimes media would take the worst angle of it and then it would be fact-checked and it would be corrected. Sometimes the media wouldn't correct it. But his belief was, I'll just perform above and beyond whatever, that media coverage is or whatever. It's all about pushing through, resilience, strong, positive perspectives, maybe a little bit of paranoia that gives him the energy to keep working. But in the end, he has optimism, which is the idea that he will win and he will make it to the end. And that's exactly what he did. I think we could all operate with some of these principles. If you want to look at it as an example, whether you believe Trump is honest or dishonest, or you like him or you don't, and so forth, doesn't matter. Just look at the man who was able to create the landslide in America, that were able to make it to, without being a politician, president of the United States, and then to run a second time and lose it. And I saw Benny Johnson posted this morning, what happened to, when you look at the numbers, what happened to the 20 million votes that were there during 2020 election. So I'm not going to say any more on that, but I think there's maybe some thoughts there to think about because he won the popular vote and it didn't even get close to the numbers of 2020. So, and then 2024, to do the comeback, to come back again and make it work despite being sued, despite, 37 indictments, being convicted. All these things, I don't know what they're going to try in the future, but all these things just show that, think about it for yourself. In the face of being sued, in the face of being shot, in the face of getting threats against family members, in the face of going to jail, getting a mugshot, any normal human being, maybe there's a few that wouldn't, but most human beings would say, this isn't for me. I'm not going to do that. It's not worth it, right? But something in his soul drove him to do this. What he says is for the benefit of the country going forward. And I do happen to believe that. Only because if you look back at the videos in the 1980s, the 1990s, when he talked about many of these policies and issues, they haven't changed. It's in his being. It's in his core. And so I think as Americans, maybe we all need to adjust a little bit. And having worked inside companies that provide leadership training and high performance training, and I never get into politics when I'm doing training or religion or anything else. I'm very careful about that. But I do teach true principles. And one thing that I've seen over the last couple years is I've done executive coaching and so forth. I have heard hundreds of stories of a lack of resiliency, a lack of strong mindset. There's, in the past several years, there's more complaining. There's more blaming that someone has done you wrong, rather than rising above it and taking the higher road and going forward. I remember, I'm sorry, I'm going a little bit long here. So if you're listening to this, hey, thanks for listening. If you haven't joined my podcast here, join the Unleash Your, or subscribe to the Unleash Your Greatness Within podcast. But I remember a story that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Shared, that he sued Trump in the 1980s or something like that. And then there was a death in the family. And while being sued, or shortly thereafter, Trump called Robert Kennedy Jr. and offered him his airplane, I think that's what it was, to help the family transport and so forth. And Trump was asked about it, or there were some commentators talking about it. And for whatever reason, Trump separates the lawsuits and the business acumen, separates that from personal care and compassion and so forth. And so maybe if we start looking at Trump from the view of compassion, maybe if we start looking at the view of showing each other more compassion, to being less judgmental, and maybe from this video as I close, just to think, hey, what does a resilient mindset, a winning mindset look like? What does that look like? And I think you have a good case example of a man who's 77 years old that has shown it. And boy, does he have energy for his age. Oh my, it's unbelievable. All right, listen, again, this was not a political message, just pointing out some distinctions and how he rose above those setbacks and rose above the adversaries and the enemies and so forth. And I think there's something to learn here. So I hope you found this message to be just insightful, something to think about, and maybe meaningful as you strive to become a more strong mental operator and operate with more of your greatness. So with that said, I wish you the very best, and may you unleash your greatness within.